Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 36 of Fracking Nightmare. So, although it's episode 36, it's actually about, 40-something weeks since the very first episode last year, which coincided with the start of the campaign at Barton Moss. Now, Barton Moss was with a company called iGas, and here we have iGas's logo on the screen. And I have to say, my hat's off to the graphic designer of iGas, who had the foresight to see Scotland separated from England in the logo. And of course, that logo is most likely going to be extremely illustrative as of next Thursday, when Scottish oil will be on the first step towards being nationalised by the independent nation of Scotland. It's got a long way to go, but if you want to see more of my observations on Scotland, then look at the last couple of episodes of Humanity versus Insanity. Meanwhile, iGas, back to iGas. In the last edition of Humanity, Fracking Nightmare even, I made the observation that the iGas stock was on the journey south. And I stated that there would be a bottle of champagne on the table when the iGas stock fell below £1. Well, I am very, very pleased to report that the investors have responded to my quest. And as of last Thursday, the iGas stock fell below £1. What we can see here is that actually at the start of the year, this was when iGas were making big announcements that they started drilling at Barton Moss, and the iGas stock jumped up to 160. I think that also actually coincided with some money coming in from overseas. But since then, it's been on this journey south. And then literally over the last week, we've seen it come down from 104 pence, and then on Friday, here it is, down under 100. In fact, this is today. This is 8 o'clock this morning. So an effort by a few people, perhaps buying a bit of stock to push it back over £1. But whatever it was they threw into the pot, it wasn't enough. And here it is, the iGas stock dropping under the £1 and finishing the day at £98.13. So if there are any iGas investors watching this, just simply send your information to me. Let me know how much you have lost on iGas stock, and the person who has lost the most will get this bottle of champagne. And if you want to give the stock away, we'll help you distribute it. So keep on going, iGas, and your woes are certainly not over. And later on in the program, we'll be joined by a veritable superstar of the anti-fracking community, none other than Simon Pook of Lazar's Solicitors, based in Manchester. And Simon has been absolutely instrumental, along with his colleagues at Lazar's, in representing many of the protectors who were unlawfully arrested by Greater Manchester Police. And Simon's got some very, very interesting data to share with us a little later. Let's have a look at iGas here. This is the iGas licenses in the north of England. And here we have the site at Barton Moss. To a big fanfare at the end of the Barton Moss campaign in March, iGas announced to their community liaison group that we'll be back in September. Well, it's September, and a week ago there was a big picnic there. This is members of the local community, and apparently there is still no sign of iGas. And the site is actually haunted now, because I went up there a couple of weeks ago late at night and came across the iGhost. I came across iGhost, and not just at Barton Moss, but also at another site, which we'll be looking at right now, in fact, because this is Ellesmere Port. Now, this is another site that iGas plan to start drilling, and this is the gathering of people on the weekend, and a camp has already been established, but apparently the local authority have advised them that they will be seeking to serve eviction papers. Well, we'll be discussing that a little bit more in the programme. But Ellesmere Port is going to be an interesting campaign because, as you will see here, the actual location is right here. This is the camp. It's between junctions 8 and 9 on the M53 out of Ellesmere Port, and right at the head of the road which leads through the industrial estate down to the well site. Now, this is going to be a very interesting campaign, I think, very different from Barton Moss, because I would very much expect IGAS and the Cheshire Police to be looking at night deliveries. So we're fully expecting that the convoys will move in to the site between 7:30 and midnight in the evening, with a view to coming out of the site between 1 a.m. and maybe 4 a.m. in the morning, because the police will certainly be wanting to endeavour to avoid any disruption of the other businesses on the industrial estate. And of course, if they don't, then there's a very good possibility that many of those businesses will be rather upset at some of the inevitable delays that IGAS will face in getting their convoys down to their site. So that's a development, and I would fully anticipate that after tonight's show that the IGAS stock will continue to fall, which of course gives you even more chance to let me know how much you've lost and see whether you are deserving of this bottle of champagne. Now, meanwhile, elsewhere in the country, down in the south, there's another operation that's going on there. The south has had a very interesting few days. A company called Celtic have had a second application to start drilling in West Sussex rejected, this time by the South Downs National Park contingent. But down in the East Sussex area here, I actually over the last few days have been giving 3 presentations in East Sussex, preparing the people of East Sussex for this industry when it rolls in. So some 300 or so people in East Sussex are now doing their research to see what will be transpiring shortly. But another camp is perhaps soon to be in the offing, and this is a camp at a place very near Gatwick Airport. And I decided to take a trip up there on Saturday morning, and this is what I saw. In fact, when I arrived, there were 2 Surrey police officers there, but they didn't stay very long. And if you want to see my interaction with the police officers, that's up on Bambuza. Needless to say that when I arrived, the first thing that one of the police officers did was ask me for my name, which I duly declined to offer. And so he was suggesting that perhaps I was being uncooperative. When I said, well, if you want to find out who I am, then maybe you should ask your forward intelligence branch, because I'm sure they will know. But anyway, he was helped out by the Magellan security, who walked straight over to me and said, oh, hi, Ian, we've got a letter for you. And they handed me this letter, which had obviously been prepared some time ago because it's dated the 9th of September 2013. So if they can't even get the date right, how can we expect them to honour their commitments under the planning conditions? And as you can see here, once they'd handed me the letter, they were quick to make a retreat behind the second wall of their fortress. And they were very, very concerned that having the Horse Hill site on my radar might actually lead to some further action. So over the weekend, after I'd posted these photographs on the various social media, I was absolutely bombarded by people claiming to be independent investors of Horse Hill developments. And actually their theme was, we're not fracking, we're not fracking, we're not fracking, we're not fracking, we're not fracking. Here's a couple of their examples. Horse Hill is not a Magellan operation. They're a minority shareholder and have no operational control. Horse Hill Developments are the controlling interest in Horse Hill. And secondly, there will be no fracking. Not sure whether they mention that in their many texts and tweets and private messages, but I think that they think they're not fracking. And then he goes on, this particular correspondent, I do not believe that you can provide a shred of evidence that fracking will occur at Horse Hill. Your argument should not stray from points that you cannot prove. Now, I am in absolute agreement with that, and I have no intention of making any suggestion that Horse Hill Developments have any intention of actually hydraulically fracturing the well at Horse Hill. Not on this occasion. However, the industry is obviously trying to be creative, and they're trying to look for ways to be able to get their social license. In other words, they're trying to create a situation where the public just sit back and say, oh, that's okay, they're not fracking. But if one digs a little bit deeper, one only has to look at the many presentations that Magellan have been giving around the world to investors over the past few months. And this is just one extract, but it makes it very clear here that within Magellan's licenses, they're going to focus on unconventional prospects, particularly in the Kimmeridge and the Liassic formations, and primarily oil shale. So they are looking for unconventionals. There it is, in words of one syllable. Well, if we were in any doubt, then just a week ago, Magellan issued a press release. And in that press release, and funnily enough, this seems to have disappeared from Magellan's website literally in the last few hours. Either that or Google perhaps are hiding it from me. So nonetheless, it was a press release, so it appears in many, many other locations. And here's the quote from marketwatch.com. During drilling, Magellan will have the opportunity to core and log at its own expense several shale and tight formations in the Cretaceous and Jurassic sections, including the Kimmeridge Clay and Liassic formations. The company expects that the information gained through these activities will provide valuable insights into the technical and economic viability of unconventional development elsewhere in the world. So there you have it. It's in black and white, or yellow and black on my slide, but it's in black and white. Magellan are using Horse Hill as an exploratory well. So the fact that Horse Hill Developments claim that their operation is purely focusing on the conventional hydrocarbons and the conventional geology, the reality is that Magellan are using this as a backdoor opportunity to establish the viability of the unconventional geology in the Weald Basin. And this, again, from Magellan's own website. And what we see here is Horse Hill. There it is, just north of Gatwick Airport, just a few hundred yards off the A217 between Reigate and Gatwick. And obviously what Magellan are doing is they're going to do the core sample analysis from the cores provided from the well being drilled at Horse Hill. And no doubt they will have come to some financial arrangement with Quadrilla for similar data from their well at Borkum. So here's the Borkum well, here's the Horse Hill well, here's the Magellan licenses. So what they're doing is they will use the data from these to then take a punt at where they can get the biggest bang for their buck in the unconventional plays here. So any suggestion that Horse Hill has absolutely no bearing or no relationship with the unconventional gas agenda is disingenuous. It's a bit like saying that foreplay has no relationship whatsoever to wanting to achieve full sex. Well, Horse Hill is the foreplay, along with Borkum, and then they're going to go in for the full Monty some months down the road. In fact, they talk about drilling 2 unconventional wells in these licenses in 2015. So Horse Hill is, without any shadow of doubt, absolutely a significant part of the unconventional hydrocarbons agenda. This is how the industry thinks that it can be creative. It's managed to convince the people in their local liaison community that this is purely a conventional well. And that's why, you know, the local groups there are saying, oh, no, we don't need any outside help. We got it all under control. No, you haven't. It's not under control. And that's why there was nobody at the gates other than 2 Surrey police officers. And somehow I don't think that they were members of the Police Against Fracking. So if you want to know where Horse Hill is, here it is. Here's Gatwick Airport. Here's the spur road off the M23 coming into Gatwick. And then you come across up towards the 217, follow the signpost to Reigate. And then after the second roundabout, there's a turning on the left, which is Horse Hill. And that will take you up this road here. And it's a 60-mile-an-hour road. And if you're not too careful, you can certainly miss the entrance because it blends into the trees, as you can see here. So that's about a quarter of a mile or so from the junction with the A217. So when I was there at the weekend, you can see the live stream. There's some of the infrastructure on site there. Magellan, riding on behalf of Horse Hill Developments. Horse Hill Developments riding on behalf of Magellan, whichever way you want to put it. But they say that 24-hour drilling operations are expected to last 6 to 8 weeks in total. They will be drilling 24/7. And so you know, some of the people in that area are going to find out what it's like to be in close proximity to this industry. And they claim that the site operations will take 20 to 25 weeks from start to finish, which sounds like a challenge to me. Well, over the next 3 months or so, there are going to be a number of attempts to spud unconventional wells around the UK. And obviously the onus is on us to spread the word, to try to encourage people to look at this for themselves. And certainly in the northeast of the country, up around here we go, up in East Yorkshire. And of course, I've been spending a significant amount of time at Crawberry Hill. Well, right now, the East Riding Council are considering Rathlin's application for a 2-year extension. And of course, that 2-year extension, this is Crawberry Hill site. This is the Chief Executive Officer of Rathlin Energy. This is David Montague Smith. Well, just to show you the sort of depths that these guys will go to, David Montague Smith is also the chairman of the Campaign to Protect Rural England in West Northamptonshire. And this is CPRE from the north of England. It says, supports no to Wolds wind farms. Well, David Montague Smith, in his capacity as chairman of the West Northants Campaign to Protect Rural England, has actually used his position to encourage the Daventry MP to write to the government to request that they remove their subsidies from wind farms. And here's the extract from the website here. It says, we are very gratified that you and so many other members of Parliament have written to the Prime Minister on the subject of removing subsidies for renewables. And we very much hope that despite early responses, the government will be receptive to your initiative, which we fully support. Quite apart from all the issues of environmental impact, efficiency and real costs associated with onshore wind power, it simply cannot be right for the industry to demand subsidy at consumer expense to encourage new wind farm developments if, as we know, such very high levels of profitability are generated when they are in operation. And of course, that's signed by best regards, David Montague Smith, Chairman, Campaign for the Protection of Rural England, West Northamptonshire District. Yeah, this is a man who sees no irony in that whatsoever. He sees no irony that there's a conflict of interest there with his dual role as Chief Executive Officer of Rathlin Energy. And in fact, if we can go back to that slide for a second, because Campaign to Protect Rural England is going through a rebranding at the moment. And that is now, of course, CPRE is the campaign for the protection of Rathlin Energy, who have every intention of fracking your countryside. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll be talking to Simon Pook of Lazar Solicitors.
So where are the gas wells? Number 1, Tara Township. Here's the town of Tara. Let's zoom out and find a common radius measurement. So we're looking at about 18 kilometres, so that'd put 6 gas wells within 18 kilometres. So number 2, Chinchilla Township. So here's the township of Chinchilla. We zoom out, we get our 18 kilometres again, which gives us about 10 gas wells within the 18 kilometre radius. Now number 3, Dalby Township. Okay, so the Dalby Township, let's zoom out, get to our measurement tool, and for Dalby we end up with 1 gas well within a 19 kilometre radius. Number 4, the unlucky ones in the gas fields. This is QGC BG Group's Kenya Gas Fields processing plant on the edge of several residential estates and farms. The evaporation ponds alone cover almost 5.5 kilometres. So let's put it in perspective. Let's zoom out from the town of Chinchilla and make a comparison. The entire width from town end to end is 3.21 kilometres. The length is about 3.29 kilometres. The evaporation ponds would cover Chinchilla 1.5 times. Let's zoom out from one of QGC's gas fields. Yes, the dots are gas wells. Yes, the industry isn't even exporting yet. Go to our measurement tool and we have around a 22 kilometre radius. Now I'll give you an example of just how safe human beings will be throughout Australia with the unconventional gas industry. QGC's Catewell cluster is in the heart of a residential estate. So Toowoomba, unconventional gas has its eyes seriously fixed on you and your surrounds. So no gas wells within a 32 kilometre radius, but if we go for a flight out to your west, you'll see the multinational giants aren't too far away. We pass Mount Irving, Mount Moriah, West Prairie, Cecil Plains, Grassdale, Cumberilla. Are you enjoying the flight? Bilby, Kogan, Weambilla. I can't see why people are whinging. This should be in everyone's backyard, shouldn't it? Here's QGC's tenements, Origin Energy's tenements. Oh, hang on, they're actually multinational corporations. Do you want this where you live? And ending with miles. And how about a flyover from Cecil Plains to central Queensland? This is beautiful farming country. Unfortunately, those that are fixated on containment of the unconventional gas global giants are delusional. Prime agricultural land represents easier, more accessible drilling. It is not protected. As the government has indicated, it does not have the right to take a landholder's right to negotiate with a gas company away from them, even if they are on prime agricultural land. Zooming out and moving further north now, you can see we've really been asleep at the wheel. Zooming in, the blurred clusters turn into definable spots, each one potentially causing irreversible damage to the country. I just cannot stress enough that a majority of the unconventional gas wells are not yet in production. The true effects will become undeniable upon export. What's the scale of damage over Queensland so far? The gas industry is only in first gear in one state, covering over 1,000 kilometres long, over 300 kilometres wide. Some very credible projections put total potential unconventional gas well numbers in excess of 200,000 for Queensland alone. It is not the intent of this video to encourage a defeatist thought process. On the contrary, unconventional gas has been heavily wounded in the eyes of the public. Our window of opportunity still exists. Think national, not in my backyard. Stop the first export train, the Surat Basin to Gladstone's Curtis Island, and stop the unconventional gas industry in this country.
And welcome back to part 2 of episode 36 of Fracking Nightmare. And it is my absolute pleasure to welcome my guest tonight, Simon Pook. Simon was actually going to join me a couple of weeks ago, but unfortunately had a bereavement in the family. But Simon is back with us tonight. And Simon, I did introduce you. I know you missed it earlier, but I did acknowledge that you were regarded by many as an absolute superhero amongst the activist community. So I know that's a tough one to follow, but tell me, what was it that attracted you, and of course Lazars, into this particular legal arena?
The firm I work for has always had a good ethos and a strong belief in promoting the civil rights of people to protest. It seemed for me when I was studying law, the only place to work was in fact Robert Lazar's, because my own values and ethos in the right to protest, the right to hold the views and lawfully express them.
Have you ever participated directly in any activism yourself? Okay, you hesitated long enough for me to know that that's not a question that you want to answer. So, okay, now we first met, I guess it would be in November of last year, right at the front end of the Barton Moss campaign. And of course, at the time, we had come up to Barton Moss shortly after the end of the Balcombe campaign. And of course, you were very aware of what had occurred at Balcombe. How closely were you following events at Balcombe?
I followed the Balcombe campaign on a daily basis, certainly as it was building up and up to and including the climate camp that took place at Balcombe. It was a turning point, really, in my view, for the environmental campaigns, and Balcombe was very much going to be the stepping stone as to how future environmental campaigns would be managed, not just by the protector community, but also about how the state was going to try and use its powers covertly and overtly, and if that was to involve the use of force, then the state's view was then so be it.
Now, I mean, there was certainly one occasion when the police, and it was an occasion when Sussex police were actually at Balcombe, there was one occasion when the police donned full riot gear. And I was there at Balcombe in my capacity as recording it, filming it, and documenting events there. And I actually made the observation to the bronze commander there, and I said, this is intimidatory. I mean, this is unnecessary escalation. What are you trying to achieve? Is this purely for media show? And I doubt that it was my comments that had any effect, but 45 minutes later, they'd at least taken their helmets off and sort of hung them on their belts. And then 45 minutes after that, they went back into their vans. But I mean, what we saw at Balcombe was undoubtedly intimidatory, if for only the reason that the vast majority of arrests have not resulted in conviction.
Yeah, I think the policing at Balcombe was certainly a stepping stone, and the state perhaps dipping its foot in the water to see what it could do and what could it potentially get away with. It was also, in my view, a ground where they sought to develop techniques such as mass arrest of people, the development of blanket bail conditions regardless of the charge, which had the effect, if you like, of depleting the protector community who was there at the so-called front line.
And of course, I mean, if back in the early days, I mean, the bail conditions were being set, which of course prevented the person from returning to the Balcombe area. And I don't think it was challenged, or the judiciary were asked to challenge those police bail conditions at Balcombe in the same way they were at Barton Moss. So you're right, it did deplete the protection community, although not to the extent that perhaps they might have liked, and if anything, it perhaps just simply attracted more people down to Balcombe. Of course, the benefit of Balcombe is that much of the Balcombe campaign was during the school holidays, so there were a lot of families coming down to the event. Plus the fact that it was only 35 minutes from London, and it also had the benefit of journalists actually coming down to Balcombe first thing in the morning before actually going to the office and then filing their stories. Now, after that campaign finished on September 28th, it was not even 6 weeks, I think, before we were all coming up to Barton Moss in readiness for the iGas campaign. And that was when you and I met for the first time. I mean, how did you anticipate that Barton Moss would unfold based on what you'd witnessed at Balcombe?
I never expected the police to respond in the way they did. At first, they seemed to be conciliatory, the police, and certainly appearing to be willing to facilitate some kind of protest. But perhaps that was of degree of naivety on my behalf, because it subsequently turned out, in fact, they were just simply gathering intelligence and evidence to suss out the lay of the land, where the tents were, who people were. And we subsequently found out there was a dossier of photographs and images that was available to Greater Manchester Police that also it appeared to include images of people from Balcombe. So there was a reasonable suggestion that dossier is in fact a national dossier. It's not regional at all.
So, I mean, I can certainly remember at least one incident where there was a particular individual who had been perhaps quite prominent at Balcombe. And she had been at Barton Moss for literally a few hours, and she was clearly singled out for arrest by the TAU, who, of course, the Barton Moss community nicknamed Thugs Are Us.
Yes.
And it did have the desired effect. I mean, after that, in fact, she was pregnant, I believe, at the time of her arrest on Barton Moss. And, of course, in the scheme of things, she decided, and probably quite rightly, that it was probably better not to come back to the Moss. So in that effect, then the police behaviour did do what they wanted to do, which was intimidate her into not returning.
Yeah, but it was. I've subsequently met that individual a few weeks ago, and it was wonderful because the child that was in her belly is now born, and she was giving her child a feed. So it was really nice to see her in a different environment and quite relaxed. On that particular day, there was 5 arrests. All of those people were in fact had been seen at Balcombe. And shortly after, there was a release, purportedly, and I use that word, from Greater Manchester Police saying all these people are from out of town. There are no locals. This is not a local issue. But we subsequently found out after Barton Moss had come to its current phase, had come to an end, that in fact the memorandum of understanding between the police, iGas, Salford City Council, gave the lead role of press release was in fact to iGas.
So iGas were effectively given the opportunity to spin in whatever way, shape or form they felt appropriate, whatever was occurring on the Moss.
Yeah, and this national law.
Oh, we've just lost you. Oh, well, that's how perfect is the timing. We're just going to see if we could get Simon back online. Hello, Simon?
Yes.
All right, we're back with you. We shouldn't be at all surprised if the line does drop. This does seem to happen with remarkable regularity when I have guests on who are talking about anything which perhaps the establishment might have some cause for concern. But I always work on the basis that the boys and girls who work at GCHQ...
Hello?
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, I always work on the basis that the boys and girls who work at GCHQ might actually learn something to their advantage if they actually take a bit of time and look at some of this information that we're sharing for themselves.
I'd have a message for them. As a solicitor, I don't go away. I defend human rights. Simply disturbing this phone message and this broadcast won't silence solicitors like myself, nor will it silence activists who wish to go out and lawfully protest. So please make a note of that.
Yeah, and by the way, I mean, we understand that the British government is putting together a list of people who they deem as domestic terrorists or potential domestic extremists. And as I have made the observation before, I'm going to be extremely pissed off if I'm not on that list. Because if I'm not on that list, I'm not doing my job properly.
I've spoke at many events, and in regards to the government's view of domestic extremists, protecting the environment for the immediate future and long-term future of the people who are yet to come, that's not extreme. That's a right that we must do, because we will have to answer. And for me, in defending the people I have, it would certainly be an honour to be placed on that list. And if I was to find myself on it, I'd be very clear that there will be a significant legal challenge.
Oh, absolutely. And I would go even further. I mean, it's not just a right. I mean, it's an obligation. And fortunately, as we go around the country and speaking to increasing numbers of people, you know, I think people are beginning to become very aware that they have a moral obligation to future generations to literally stand up to this abomination. You know, this is a classic example of an increasing number of people contacting their elected representatives, and yet the democratic process clearly being found wanting. So in that situation, what are you left with? What are you left with is peaceful protest and civil disobedience.
Yeah, well, we found this at Barton Moss. The Salford City Council of politicians remained silent whilst the focus was against the fracking company iGas and trying to protect the immediate community. And what we've subsequently found out in the Memorandum of Understanding is that the local politicians at Salford City Council were in fact quite snugly tucked up in bed with Greater Manchester Police, iGas, in terms of the Memorandum of Understanding and sharing resources. So their silence was more perhaps of, I would very much hope, embarrassment.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I have that Memorandum of Understanding on the screen, and here is the document. It's freely available online. And we would encourage people to read it. This is the Memorandum of Understanding that Simon's referring to. This is literally the Memorandum of Understanding between Greater Manchester Police, iGas and Salford City Council. And I'm very sure that there is a similar document in existence in East Yorkshire and another one in Surrey. And it's absolutely essential that the Freedom of Information legislation be utilised to gain sight of these documents, and we can see, you know, exactly who's calling the shots. Because, you know, from my perspective, and again, of course, I was primarily at Barton Moss to document proceedings and make sure that, along with others, of course, that the events were recorded from our perspective as well as from the police evidence gatherers' perspective. And you know, what I witnessed there just added and confirmed my understanding of the role of the police in this country, which has gone from being peace officers to being clear corporate enforcement officers.
Yeah, I mean, there was a particular day at Barton Moss. It was a Saturday, and I'd received calls from distressed people at Barton Moss. I went there, the police, there was hundreds of police that they were agitated, they were high, and as they came back down from the site, I ended up going into the field. I feared for my safety. The police were trying to get people, and on this particular day, there was a young woman who was held in what I would suggest it was a stress position, a torture position, where she was made to kneel down whilst her arms were hoisted backwards towards her head.
I think we have a picture of that. Actually, I think we're talking about, and we've shown video footage of this before. And
that was the day, yes.
Yeah, this is Vanda, who was clearly targeted by the TAU, yes, on more than one occasion, and of course threatened with social services. And again, on previous edition of Fracking Nightmare, we've shown the footage of Vanda being clearly hounded by social services. So, once again, the establishment agenda using every opportunity to try to intimidate.
It did, and again, it goes back to the Memorandum of Understanding. Why was social workers from Salford City Council present at a peaceful protest? I haven't seen it before, and I haven't seen it since. The Memorandum of Understanding was effectively Salford City Council pledging their support and perhaps their resources to ensure, as we've had judgments by district judges at the Magistrates Court, that GMP were facilitating a private contract and acting like civil enforcers, and hence a significant number of allegations and cases have collapsed at Manchester City Magistrates Courts.
I know, Simon, I think there was something in excess of 200 arrests. I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm off the ballpark. But I think there was something in excess of 200 arrests. But I believe that was only something like about 75 different people, as some were arrested multiple times. I think the record was one person being arrested, I think, on 9 occasions. And I think I'm right in saying that every one of those 9 arrests has failed to reach a conviction.
Yeah, it was quite scandalous. It was in excess. It was around 250, approximately, arrests made, and around 70 or 80 of those allegations have subsequently been withdrawn. Now, we weren't satisfied that the prosecution was saying, "Well, look, there's no case to answer." We want a formal not guilty for our clients. Our clients did nothing wrong. They simply went along to a peaceful protest, and they were subject to the state's role of political policing, where and I've said this, I'm on record, it is my view, having observed Greater Manchester Police, that they discarded the Convention of Human Rights into the dustbin in favour of pushing through a political agenda. We must never find ourselves as a civil society in a position where our police forces are acting as corporate enforcers. It's a scandal. It's money that with the taxpayers' money, they're using it to enforce civil contracts. We should never be in that position.
And the bulk of those arrests were conducted by the TAU, the Greater Manchester Police Tactical Aid Unit. Like I said, euphemistically known as Thugs R Us. But they were brought in there, and of course the chief inspector, the bronze commander, who was there for, I'm estimating probably about 80% of the time, was Chief Inspector Hill of the GMP. And it was very evident that, and everybody knew that when he put the TAU on the front line, basically they were going for their 5 a day. Although they denied that they had a quota, it was just remarkably coincidental that they would generally go for 5 people. And, we got the measure of that. But, the Greater Manchester Police at least made an attempt to facilitate the process. At least they went through the charade, because when local people would come down to the entrance of Barton Moss Road, they would be asked if they had come to join the protest. And then they were facilitated up the road to enable them to get in front of the police line. And of course, at that point, they were effectively fair game. And of course, when local people were arrested, it was, in many cases, a massive own goal, particularly when they arrested a 15-year-old girl who was a local resident.
Yeah, I've watched many videos over the last number of months, and I'm still watching them now because there are cases still before the courts. The videos that I've watched show people being selected for arrest. You see senior officers pointing at people, and subsequently the tactical aid unit going round and either dragging them backwards or effecting a very forceful arrest. In my view, the arrests there were all targeted. They were selected by, for example, the police liaison officers. I've got videos of them. The worst one I've saw is them selecting two old people. And forgive me if I use the word old and it's incorrect, but they were of senior years. But they were selected for removal. It's a key word, removal, not for arrest, but to put them to the side in an attempt that looks like they're trying to help them get out of the way of these unruly police officers. And I think that's what they meant, police officers, not the protesters.
Well, of course, the classic of that was Ann Power, wasn't it? Ann Power, the 82-year-old resident. I believe that Anne lives around the Chawton area. And Anne was, I think, pretty much there most days. And of course, it would have been a massive own goal for Greater Manchester Police to have arrested Ann Power. And so they would literally corral her out of the front line. And so she was effectively selected for this very special attention to make sure that she was away from the front line, so that the TAU then had sort of effectively open access to the rest of the protection community.
Yeah, I mean, the police tended to use the phrase, it's for your health and safety. It's on the videos I have, that term is bound about quite a lot when it comes to people who the police didn't want to arrest, but they were there, they were exercising their lawful right to peaceful protest. It would have been, as you say, an own goal to arrest them, and that's something that the police didn't want to do. Of course, their health and safety was paramount within GMP's mind, if not only to get them out of the way so they could effect a swift and often brutal arrest.
And it really was brutal, wasn't it? And in fact, I've just got a couple of pictures here. I mean, this is, again, sadly, this is Vanda again. Being clearly targeted, and of course these pictures were shown all around the world, and it's my opinion that this was deliberate intimidatory behaviour to try to discourage people from joining the protest and coming down and participating in the protection of Barton Moss, and I'm told that the police actually photographed 606 different people during the Barton Moss campaign. Now, that doesn't include the literally thousands who participated in some of the marches at the weekends, but these were people who were there on a daily basis. And I have got one of Ann Power. This is an iconic picture of Ann Power, shaking her stick. Her instantly recognisable with her red headband. And of course, the police were instructed never to engage with her because they had absolutely no chance of winning that discussion. Now, Simon, there's one thing I want to discuss with you because obviously the Crown Prosecution Service was set up to set guidelines for police behaviour and how they should behave, how they should react in any given situation. And on the Crown Prosecution Service website, there are some very, very clear guidelines of how police should police peaceful protests. And there were a number of occasions where I would specifically, with the camera, walk up to the bronze commander, whomever that might be on the day, and ask if they were planning on abiding by the Crown Prosecution Service guidelines for arrests at peaceful protest. And with one notable exception, they all declined to respond. But there was one response that really quite shocked me, and that was the inspector's minder said, well, we don't follow the guidelines of the Crown Prosecution Service. We follow the guidelines of ACPO, the Association of Chief Police Officers. Now, forgive me, but ACPO is a private company. So we seem to have a situation where we have a private company effectively ignoring the law of the land and determining for themselves, on behalf of the corporatocracy, how they will police these situations for the benefit of the corporation.
Yeah, but what was interesting, I recall that video, and absolutely right, the police had no regard for the CPS charging and bail conditions that they imposed. And hence, every time people were arrested and given blanket bail conditions because it was at the whim of ACPO, we were very successful in having them challenged and removing them, and people being bailed unconditionally. Now, I am aware that the CPS had words with GMP and saying, look, it's getting embarrassing. You're arresting them, giving them blanket bail conditions. Lazars are coming in here 2 days later, and the judges now aren't even listening to us. They're simply granting them because the judiciary realised that there was something fundamentally wrong with Greater Manchester Police bail conditions. We also know that officers at Swinton Police Station frequently expressed the view that they were somewhat embarrassed by the conduct of their colleagues at Barton Moss, and a number of the protectors were looked after quite sincerely. I mean, they shouldn't have been there in the first place, but what a distinction between the officer in the custody suite who is embarrassed by his colleagues and, you know, giving the appropriate level of care, but also being bound when he didn't want to impose the blanket bail conditions. He was overrode by somebody higher up on the phone. No doubt somebody called Captain Kirk, because they never manifested themselves.
It was the Gold Commander, yeah. But and Peter Fahey, who's come under some very interesting fire from other quarters recently, of course. But I mean, what we're seeing is a pattern being established, of course. But do you think that the fact that IGAS have not returned to Barton Moss, and actually it's looking more and more likely that IGAS are not going to return to Barton Moss, and certainly not while the only access is up Barton Moss Road, which is, of course, a footpath.
Yes.
But do you think that maybe one of the reasons that they're reluctant to return is because the Greater Manchester Police have said, look, boys, you know, we gave it our best shot and we haven't come out of this exactly covered in glory. And you know, to be honest, we're just not going to go through it again just so you can get your bits in the ground on the moss.
It's possible, but I think that IGAS, what has subsequently come out during trials and through the freedom of information requests, such as the Memorandum of Understanding, it's actually set, not, you know, IGAS and GMP, it set them back quite a lot, because what it showed, that we had Greater Manchester Police saying we're trying to balance the rights of the protesters to protest, but also the rights of the people to carry out their work. Well, that was clearly a lie, because they facilitated IGAS in the helipad to resources and access to the media. At not one point did the protector community be given the same access to the helipad or to the intelligence or to the media. So how did Greater Manchester Police balance those rights to protest? They did not. They lied and they were caught out. And I think all of these small revelations that are coming out is becoming increasingly embarrassing for IGAS and Greater Manchester Police.
Well, and of course, at one point, and you'll remember this, we had the Flaregate, which was the accusation that a flare had been fired at a police helicopter from the camp, which, of course, had that been the case, then the whole of Western Manchester would have been in absolute lockdown and there'd have been armed police all over the place. Instead, it took them 72 hours to then get a search warrant for the camp. But, of course, Greater Manchester Police have a massive problem with that one, because the official story is that that occurred in the early hours of Saturday morning. But unfortunately, one of the Greater Manchester Police officers sidled up to me on Friday morning and said that they'd received a report that a flare had been fired at a helicopter the previous evening. And so either this police officer was gifted with remarkable clairvoyance, or somewhere along the line they got the story a bit mixed up. But I suspect that this whole saga has the hallmarks of Amanda Webster, who, of course, has the dual role of Assistant Commissioner for Lancashire Police, yes, but is also a lawyer with a Preston-based company who specialise in protest busting.
Well, we specialise in protest support, and I've yet to encounter the delights of Miss Foster again across a courtroom. But I'll be very clear, she may specialise in protest busting. We specialise in human rights and the right to protest. And I think our track record can speak for itself.
Simon, you guys have done an amazing job, and I have to absolutely concur with the observation that somebody made when I posted that you would be my guest on Fracking Nightmare tonight. I mean, you are an absolute superstar. I mean, your support to the protection community and that of your colleagues at Lazars has been absolutely first rate. And of course, you've continued that support over in East Yorkshire, where Humberside Police are still seem to be determined to use trade union and labour relations legislation to push protectors off the road. What would your counsel be to the protectors over in East Yorkshire who are being manhandled under Tolra?
Well, we first saw this rolled out in Balcombe, and it failed. We saw it rolled out at Barton Moss. It failed. It has been tried at West Yorkshire already, so East Yorkshire, and it's failed. I've yet to see how that particular piece of legislation can, in fact, be an effective and lawful charge. I think the police have got this wrong. But what's interesting is that it gives further support that there is a national think tank going on about how to charge and how to deter the right to peaceful protest. Say it's how do we criminalise peaceful protest? But my counsel to the protesters, you all have my number, and if the police ever wish to use that, I'll happily speak to the police officer at the time. It's a failed charge. It's not one, in my view, that can succeed.
Yeah, and it is, of course, purely intimidatory. Yes. Well, Simon, I know that we have a long campaign ahead of us. We have 233 days until the general election next year. And certainly I know that this rapidly growing social movement known as the anti-fracking community, it's one of the fastest growing social movements this country has ever seen. It's an issue that anybody who spends even a modicum of time doing a little bit of background research for themselves realizes that there is absolutely no place for this abomination anywhere in the world, but certainly not beneath this densely populated country of ours, and certainly not beneath a country that is reliant on a very much integrated aquifer system such as the UK. So, Simon, I know that we're going to have an ongoing relationship. And by the way, I hope you won't mind, but I'd also like to take the opportunity to acknowledge Ugo Hayter at Lee Day and Lindsay Johnson, of course, who represented myself and others during the eviction process at Barton Moss. Which I'm pleased to say that I think an appropriately satisfactory result was achieved. And I know you've got an ongoing case with the Preston New Road eviction, which I think comes back to court in October. Is that right?
It is, yeah. I mean, I don't think we should say too much about that because it's still before the court. But what I'm happy to say is it certainly is a very aggressive campaign on behalf of the people bringing the claim. I was quite surprised at what's gone on in the last 2 weeks.
Well, Simon, we've run out of time tonight. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I hope you'll come back and join us again in the future. And I have to say, right now, I am extremely grateful for the judiciary of the UK, because if it wasn't for the judiciary upholding the law, then we might be in a very, very different situation. So, this is a fast-growing social movement. Unfortunately, the democratic process seems to be increasingly bankrupt. So ultimately, this is what we're left with. And I absolutely know that we will win the day, and especially when we have people such as yourself and your team at Lazars. So Simon Pook, thank you very much, and thank you to everyone out there watching Fracking Nightmare. I should be back here in the studio in Plymouth next week. So enjoy. Catch you soon.